and gentlemen, and all those in between. My name is Will Cabrera, and I am the storyteller for this Vampire the Masquerade game that takes place in Salem, Oregon in 1984. But before we get there, we have a nice introduction to get through for one of my close friends from Miami, Florida, who has moved away to become a Twitch star on their own right. Uh, my friend Joyce has been streaming for almost 4 months, if not a little bit more than that. She's a variety streamer that focuses on games like Fortnite, Dead by Daylight, who she just picked up, and other games like Spellbreak that she has neglected playing with me on, and other team games that she enjoys having crowds and friends of her stream kind of join her, unlike Darian, who is troublesome to say the least. But you can find her at twitch.tv/joytoy13. So Joyce, thank you for joining this game. I believe this is your first time actually playing a tabletop RPG. How is that for you?
Yes, it is. It's exciting. I've always wanted to. I've always been jealous of everyone playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm ready to do a tabletop.
Yeah, there are no dungeons yet, and there are definitely no
And no
dragons.
dragons.
But there are
That's
vampires,
alright.
and there'll be lots of blood. And at some point, there might be a dungeon or two because sex sells. Uh, but Joyce, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you looking forward to with tabletop gaming? What made you leave Miami? I mean, I know that I want to leave Miami, but what made you want to leave Miami?
Um, so I decided to move to New York because I've always wanted to since the first time I visited here when I was young. I left Miami because as much as I love Miami and its home, it's not my vibe, for lack of a better word. I appreciate the diversity that New York offers, and I love that very much.
Yeah. I've
Um,
never been, but I've seen pictures, and I can only imagine what it must be like to be surrounded by that history and that innovation.
it's amazing. It's kind of surreal, and eventually you get kind of used to it, maybe a little jaded because New York is tough on anyone,
Mm.
but it's still yeah. New York stays with you, and it's just there's no place like it anywhere else in the world. So I definitely love it. I do miss Miami though. It will always be
Yeah,
home.
there. I don't know if there's a lack of croquetas up there, but
There is.
I can only assume that
There is.
once you leave a certain radius, there's there's no vaca frita and there's no croquetas, and that hurts my soul. So
Yeah,
uh,
believe me, it hurts me too.
yeah, so we're gonna be playing Vampire the Masquerade, um, fifth edition for those of you at home keeping track, uh, and your character is named Jane Arwen. Tell us a little bit about Jane without going too deep into it. Like what do you want to share
Oh,
before we get into the game with her?
so Jane is comes from a troubled marriage.
Hmm.
Her mother is an alcoholic, and her father is unfaithful to her mother, which
So role
is
models.
why she's an alcoholic. Yeah. And Jane is pretty much, she's an only child, and she's pretty much sort of had to fend for herself because she hasn't really had any parental caretaking in
Mm.
terms of her father is a successful businessman and he's never at home either because he's working or cheating. and her mother
No in
is
between.
always drunk or angry or distraught. So Jane is pretty much takes care of herself, and she doesn't have friends, she doesn't have siblings, so um she's very much in the solo mentality.
A lone wolf.
Yeah,
I
she's
get
a
you.
lone wolf.
I get you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there, I asked you if you were okay with different things and what was off the table, and you said you are prepared to handle anything that is thrown at you, and that is admirable. We are, of course, living in the world of darkness, so the dark is all around. And for those of you that are watching Lovecraft Country, which is a fantastic show, just know that darkness is in the heart of every human. And we're going to look into just a little bit of that with this story. But we are going to start in what is now, in modern day, Hollywood, California, because Jane has gotten some luck in getting onto the silver screen as color has started to permeate all of the what have now become regular fare and what was once called the talkies. Talking pictures, I tell you, talking pictures. So Jane has a few films under her belt as a secondary kind of supporting actress. She has been around certain people of the time, but there is currently a celebration going on in a small high rise apartment overlooking the mountain and the beautiful, at a distance, sign that reads Hollywood. That is the target that was Jane's sole purpose for leaving her home behind. And there is a buzz of electricity in the party. There is and party is a very encompassing word. It is a get together. It is a couple of actors who have a very open mind as to what is happening currently in 1963. It is August 28th, and you are all sitting around the radio listening to a recorded playback of one of the biggest protest marches in history at this point in time, as Dr. Martin Luther King has just delivered his I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. There is a buzz in the room as people are discussing what side of history they're going to be remembered on. There is a open discussion as to who they think will be the first to break openly as far as following in the footsteps of who is now a great orator and symbol for peace in our time. Um, but there are a couple of industry people whom you've only heard about recently as far as names are concerned, but this is the first time you've actually been in the room with them. All three of them come from money. There is a kind of flaunting of their their pockets as far as the three of these people are concerned. The other actors and actresses that are there are kind of in the same garb as you. They've gotten out of their last costume call, and they've gotten into just kind of comfortable clothing. The the three main kind of central points of discussion are in different parts of the apartment. outside on the terrace, there's a small group of people encircling an older gentleman called Franklin Toombs. People who are in his circle call him Frankie. Frankie is an older, kind of rugged looking, almost olive skinned, clean shaven face of just wrinkles, but not of age, of kind of like struggle. And he has a couple of rings on his fingers that kind of shine and sparkle here and there as the light catches them. He has a jacket that he has tossed over the side of a chair next to him, and has his sleeves rolled up. He has the first two buttons of his shirt undone. He has no tie. There is no vest. It is a business carefree look that he has. By the minibar and the archway that leads into the kitchen, there is a woman who is slender in a very form-fitting dress with a stylized kind of velvet jacket. She has elegant, almost silvery blonde hair that is trussed up and cascading down the back of her neck. And everyone knows her as one of the big investors in town that chooses to go after the bigger names. There's a lot of tenacity in the project she backs, and a lot of people wonder how her husband lets her get away with some of the moves she makes. But her name is Anastasia Richards. Um, some call her Anna, but not a lot do. Like anytime that she's referred to by her full name. And then on a couch by the radio, kind of very lackadaisical and just really in a relaxed atmosphere, there is a done up, very proper, kind of anachronistic looking as far as his dress is concerned, but he looks like he's better equipped to be at a British party, like straight out of Parliament. He's got tails on his coat. He's got an ascot that's tucked into his top button undone of his shirt. No tie, a beautiful kind of pin at the that ties the ascot together, and then just very elegant silk shirt and pants. But everyone knows him as Antoine Malcolm Davies, and he is a British investor that's looking to kind of make a stake for himself here in the United States. You are currently in the middle of this apartment, just surrounded by other actors and actresses who are all vying for some attention in some way, shape, or form. What would you like to do?
Um, I'm going to go ahead and go towards the minibar to grab a drink
Okay.
and potentially approach Anastasia.
Okay. So sure enough, you approach the mini bar. There's a kind of not a hunk, but a kind of best friend supporting character type at the bar who immediately kind of stands up straight as you approach, and he kind of tussles his hair back, and he starts to kind of pull up a glass, and you see the bucket of ice, and he kind of smiles as you approach, and he looks at you. He's like, Jane, right? You were in that movie with oh man, uh, I am ill prepared for this conversation. I apologize. I'm at at the sound of sounding just a tad bit immoral. I've just been dumbstricken by your grace, and I apologize. Can I make you a drink? And you see him kind of shake the glass at you.
Um, I would uh, smile and just ask for a whiskey on the rocks.
Okay. You see him raise his eyebrows in surprise, and he goes ahead and drops a couple of glasses, drop of ice cubes in the glass, and then pours yourself like a thumb width of whiskey, and he kind of slides it over in your direction. He's like, are you sure you can handle that? That's an acquired taste for some people." And you see him take a sip out of his cup.
Okay, she. Um, okay, I will grab a glass and just very calmly serve another glass with ice for the whiskey and hand it to him and ask, "Can you handle it?" or something along those lines.
Okay. Uh, you see him put his drink down, which looks to be like a combination of things, but very, very kind of blended out. Like there's no
Yeah, some
real.
fruity watered down shit for sure.
It's a blend. It's a blend for sure. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and and he kind of takes the glass that you poured
Bitch.
him. He takes the glass that you poured him, and you see him kind of like shake it up in front of him and smell it. And he's just like, this is a mighty fine drink you poured me here. I appreciate it, Miss Arwen. And he kind of holds the glass out towards you to clink.
Link.
Okay. And he does take a sip out of it, the smallest sip in the world. And he kind of just scrunches his face, and it becomes incredibly tiny. Uh, and you hear Anastasia kind of giggle to herself. And there's a smile on her face.
Okay. Um, uh, I want to say she obviously notices that she's caught Anastasia's attention, which it was the goal.
Mm-hmm. You
But
got it.
maybe she wants to keep going with this guy. I'm trying to think of what to say to him that would be like
Yeah.
the punchline or like the end.
Yeah.
Um um okay. So I take a drink and it's like water to
Okay.
me.
So you almost downed
And
the whole thing. 'Cause. 'Thing. 'Cause. 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 '
Yeah, sure. I take the whole thing in one swig
Shoot it down.
and just um
He takes a step back. He was not prepared for this. But you do see that she kind of.
okay. So I put it down
Mhm.
and then I ask him to be a doll and pour me another one. Meanwhile, I turn my attention towards Anastasia.
Okay. Uh, he nods at you and he puts down his glass next to the other one that he has, and he kind of slides the whiskey that you served him. Kind of he slides it away from what was his drink originally, and uh, you see him immediately. You hear the cubes kind of fall into the glass as he starts to just give you another shot of whiskey um, in a different glass. But you see Anastasia kind of turns to look at you, and she nods courteously, uh, and she kind of looks over at him, and then kind of just raises one of her eyebrows, like, "Is that your type of guy?" kind of thing.
I think I would give her I would give her one of these. Like one of those like what are you gonna do with these guys? I don't know.
What are you gonna do with these guys?
What are
She
you gonna do?
she immediately picks up on that, and you see the smile widen on her face. Um, and after a moment, you see him kind of slide in between the two of you, with like the drink in front of his face, kind of like handing it to you like a scared puppy. He's like, I gave you a little bit more this time. I think you might wanna, pace yourself, Miss Arwen."
Uh, I maintain strong eye contact with him and say, "Thank you." Take the drink, take a sip, put it down. No, actually, no. Should never leave a drink. Well, I'm thinking I'm just gonna leave the drink. Okay, put the drink down and then walk up to Anastasia and introduce myself.
Okay, okay. So you kind of walk around him, and he is like following you and turning his body, and now becoming this third point in the triangle that has become this situation, uh, oblivious of the social cues that you were trying to put down. But you, how do you introduce yourself?
Um, I know who she is,
Mm-hmm.
so I call her by her name and then say, Jane Arwen, nice to meet you. A pleasure to meet you.
You see her her almost aquamarine eyes glisten as you say her name, and the smile starts to diminize. It becomes a little bit smaller, but it's still there. Um, and once you introduce yourself, she grins, and you see these beautiful white teeth. Um, she's a little bit taller than you. She's about almost 6 foot with her heels on, and so she kind of has a slight tilt down towards you, and she says to you as she puts her drink down on the bar as well. She goes, well, I thought I was going to be at a disadvantage when you called me by my name, but I appreciate you giving me yours in return. So, Miss Arwen, you're making your name for yourself, aren't you?
Uh,
There's a hint of Scottish and Irish in her voice from across the pond, but it is soft and it is sing song, and there's a kind of comfort in it.
um, I smile and nod, sort of humbly,
Mm-hmm.
and I respond with, well, definitely not as much of a name as you've made for yourself.
Oh, rumors are only rumors. I can't be held accountable for what I do or don't do. But maybe there's a project that the both of us can work on, and you can see for yourself what's true and what isn't. Is that something you'd like, Miss Arwen?
Um, I would I would definitely agree, and then maybe offer if she wants a refill of her drink.
You see the dude uh, jumping at the chance for a job. Immediately puts his arm around you, and looking at her, he's like, "Well, you got your leading couple right here, ma'am, for your whatever next endeavor you might be looking at funding. Uh, I'm sure Miss Arwen here would be just the nicest peach on my arm." Uh, and you see that when he says that, she smiles at him like a mother who is trying desperately not to belittle the obvious garbage project that a child has brought in. Uh, and she looks over at you before looking back at him, and she looks at him and says, "I I do believe the lady did not ask for your attention in any way, shape, or form, Mr. McIntyre. So I would appreciate it if you removed yourself from our conversation." And immediately you see him kind of, his hand shoots away from your body, uh, and he shivers almost uncontrollably. And you notice that there is these two ovular dark spots that are growing from his groin down his pants. And he just looks, puts his drink down, and just is like, "Excuse me, ladies, I seem to have had an accident." And you see him just kind of rush over to the coat hanger by the door, grab his coat, and just exit the apartment in a rush. Uh, she starts to laugh, but you can tell that it isn't like a genuine laugh. Like, it is kind of like the laugh of somebody who is enjoying the prank they've just played. Yeah, and she looks at you and she's like, "So now that we've discarded the troublesome trash, would you happen to have any project in mind moving forward, Miss Arwen? Or are you just complacent being a supporting character?"
Uh, I would suggest that I have an idea for a for a movie script, in which I guess consequently I would like to star in.
And you have this written, or is this some idea that exists in the nether space of thoughts? What in what capacity is this idea currently in?
Um, at this point, I would once again ask if I can refill her drink and see if we can sit down to talk about it.
Let's take a look at your character sheet and see what stats might come to mind for this. So you're trying to get her into a position to talk with you. So let's try a persuasion. So let's do persuasion and charisma and see what the dice gods have in store for you. As you motion to some of the stools that are nearby, unoccupied. The conversation on the terrace has reached a crescendo. You notice the well-dressed man on the couch has kind of stood up and is starting to look out onto the terrace nervously. And once you're done with your charisma check, we can do a perception check to see if you notice the looks that are going around. So you got a persuasion of 2, a charisma of 3, so that should be 5 dice. Yeah, 2 successes is more than enough to get her to sit down with you at the stools. Go ahead and make an awareness and composure roll to see if you can notice who the well-dressed gentleman seems to be eyeballing. Three successes. Very nice. So yeah, so you see that he has turned his attention back and forth between Frankie on the terrace, who is getting in someone's face and yelling some colorful language about the people of color that you have just listened to on the radio. And he is looking at Anastasia and kind of has this imploring look about him. But she does kind of sit down with you at the pair of stools. She's like, go ahead and tell me about this story you have in your head.
So considering I noticed Frankie and what's his name?
Antoine.
Antoine. So I have my eye on them as we sit down, but then my attention goes completely to Anastasia, and I start telling her about my idea for a script featuring a strong female lead with no male counterpart. It is not a romance. It's like a creative or fantastical version, basically, of how Jane sees herself.
Okay. She smiles through the entire pitch, and at the end, she she becomes cold almost, and she looks at you, and the smile is still there, but it's not comforting anymore. And she looks at you, and she's like,
Mm.
"Oh dear, that will never sell, and I don't think there's an audience for that. You know, we could try to you could try to sell it as a Tarzan movie, and maybe he meets some Amazonians, but no one would dare throw money at a movie about a woman. Uh, that's that's not good business, Miss Arwen. Is there another story perhaps that you have? Is there Can we accommodate Tarzan and the Amazonians in your story, or is there can we maybe take a page out of some Greek literature and try to create a narrative that can be sold?
Take a moment, and obviously a part of me has died inside, but I should have figured as much.
Yeah.
And I finish the drink,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just as quickly snap back into the smile and the comfort and say the Tarzan is a great idea.
Oh, I'm glad you seem to think so. I think it could be a good moneymaker, and I think with the right person to play opposite of you, I think it should be quite the showstopper. And I'm more than willing to. And as she's about to say something to you, your hearing suddenly becomes overwhelmed by yelling and screaming as everybody's kind of shifting out towards the terrace, and you see Frankie just pick up this actor uh, after saying some derogatory term and just tosses him over the side of the terrace. You are a good 15 or 16 stories up, and everybody is just in shock at what they've seen. And you see the well-dressed male by the couch kind of sidle over towards where you two are talking, and in a language that you can only assume is French by how soft and how fast it is coming out of their mouths. You see them talking, and there's no real alarm as to what's happening. And then you see they both kind of nod, and she looks at you. She's like, if you'll excuse me for a second, I have to attend to a friend of mine and make sure that. And you see at that point, Antoine kind of holds up his hand, and he looks over at you and he bows graciously, almost like an old-fashioned knight would to a female. Uh, and he's like, "Madam, I apologize for this intrusion, and I will try to take care of Franklin on my own terms. I just wanted Anastasia to know that things have changed for us tonight." And he bows again and immediately starts to rush past everyone towards Frankie, who is grabbing a second uh, actor by the throat and kind of lifting him up. But you see Anastasia kind of look at you and just grabs your hand, and she just looks at you, and you find the face that she gives you just gut wrenching. It is beautiful and sad and haunted simultaneously. And she looks at you. She's like, I don't suppose you'd want to be getting out of here before this turns ugly."
Um, I'm very concerned, but I run a solo mentality, so I'm not definitely not going to get involved, and I am desperate to leave. So I say, let's go.
Okay. Uh, you immediately race down. You know, you get in the elevators and you run down to the garage. Um, and you can see that there is a car that has been crushed from the top, and you can only imagine that that's where the gentleman landed. Uh, but she kind of rushes you past it, and you hear her say, "Don't look, don't look. It'll only make things worse for you." Um, and as she walks over to one of the cars that has a gentleman standing by it, you see him kind of nod at her as you two approach, and he gets into the driver's seat and starts it. Um, and the back doors kind of open on their own, and she motions for you to kind of get in. Uh, if you do, the car immediately takes off once both of you are inside. And as you're driving down towards what you think is her apartment or her house or something, you can hear sirens in the distance getting closer. And at one point, you see them just drive by you. There's two police cars and what looks to be just that white shoebox of an ambulance rushing past you towards where you just were. Um, and after a good 5 minutes of silence, she turns and just kind of holds your hand very caringly, very, very motherly. And there is a sensation of warmth that comes over you, even though her hand is ice cold. Um, it's almost like this is what you expect mothers to react with, given like trauma, whereas your mother would have just kind of seen what happened and then poured herself another drink and sat in the corner. This woman has kind of gone out of her way to get you out and into safety and to keep you kind of cared for and enveloped. Um, and you see her other hand kind of come up to your face, and it's just gently caressing you and taking this nurturing, very firm grip on your face, and her soft voice kind of just slithers in the distance, in the small kind of distance between you two. She just slithers into your ears very, very musically, and she's just like, are you hungry at all, or do you want something to eat, or are you fine just going back to mine and having a chat?
I think I'm kind of struck by the situation. It's the first time I've experienced something like that, something as nurturing as that feels. It takes a moment, but I think I just say, um, that's fine, or it's okay with just going to wherever she's going. I
Okay.
can barely,
Right as
yeah.
you're in the middle of trying to gather your words together, you see her eyes become these kind of green blue focal point, and you feel her hand kind of grip onto the lower part of your jaw and the back of your neck, and she pulls you in for a kiss.
Ooh. Um, yeah, just let it happen.
Okay. Uh, you see her other hand come to the other side of your face, and there's no like male passion here. There's no need to kind of bury the bone, as it were. There's just very relaxed, very intimate touching. She is almost all about wanting you to feel touched and to feel like this is normal. Uh, and there's no like groping or anything invasive. It's very much here, like it's caught here in the face, and after a moment, you you see her kind of pull away and then start to kiss your cheek and just kind of on the side of your mouth, and then start to move towards your ear. And there's a moment where she breathes out, and it's this soft, very erotic breath on your ear. And then you hear her, or you feel her mouth kind of slide open as she's about to take in a breath. And that's when you feel the world just shift for you. There's this pinprick of pain that just becomes this lucid moment of ecstasy. And there's all these dreams that start to flood your vision of movie screens and posters adorned with your picture, and there's just people waiting in line to get your autograph, and there's this throng of men who are kind of sitting like step stools over broken glass that you're kind of walking across to this finish line that you've built up since you've left your home, of just stardom and what it means for you. And then everything goes black. And you can hear your heart beat slowing in your ears, just slowing down and just struggling to pump that life energy to the rest of your body. You can just hear that thump, thump, thump. And then there's nothing. And there's this infinitely tiny moment of fear before something warm and immediately cold kind of touches your lips and slides down your kind of defunct tongue, and just finds its way into your throat and down into your gullet. And then there's this euphoric grip that overtakes you, and there's just this dark voice that growls out more and more, and your hands just instinctively kind of wrap themselves over whatever is in your mouth, and you start to pull this nectar, this beautiful, life giving sustenance, and you can hear the voice start to soften as it is satiated, and your eyes open, and you can see that there is some degenerate, some lowlife, some secondhand citizen of the world that has had his arm kind of gashed open, and you are sitting there with his blood trickling into your mouth, and there's a moment of disgust that is pushed aside by the need for more. And you can see on the other side of him, there's another transient that seems to have uh, some of his faculties still in order, and he just has his head kind of tilted back. His eyes have rolled into the back of his head. His mouth is drooling and agape, and you can see that on an arm similar to you and similar to the drug needle that it has become is Anastasia drinking from his arm. And just this pop as her mouth lets go, and there's a smile, that same smile from the apartment that kind of creeps over her face, and she just looks at you, and you can see the fangs now clearly, very pronounced, and she just looks at you. She's like, good, good. I felt like you had some tenacity in you, so I'm glad that the transformation took. There's a lot that I have to teach you, Jane Arwen, and I hope that you're open to the lessons. And she just goes back to the arm and drinking. And as she does that, you kind of look down at the bleeding man on your lap, and there's the horror of what you might have done to do this, or what you might become. But the only thing that you know is that whatever you were doing has satiated and silenced that voice in your head that just keeps repeating the word more and more and more. And as you kind of have this moment where you think back and you wished that you could have changed your mother, or you could have stood up to your father, there's a moment where all of that is washed away, and you bring that arm up to your mouth, and you just start sucking that blood down into your gullet. And you've taken your first step into becoming a kindred in the world of darkness. Welcome to Vampire the Masquerade, Joyce. And so, with that, we will leave you to our next character and the next time we play. And I hope that all of you have very pleasant dreams as we wait to see what unfolds in Salem by night. Thank you, and have a good night.